I take you back 3 years to what happened in Burma, to the demonstrations there, which didn't bring down a regime, but they exposed what was happening on the streets, all because of the mobile phone. Listen.
Foreign journalists are banned from Burma. That we can witness this extraordinary uprising is thanks to technology. People are getting pictures out any way they can. These images were sent by a BBC viewer in Rangoon.
You take it for granted now, but that was only 3 years ago. There's a fundamental change going on, and it's happening, as Shaker has said, at a speed which very few people can embrace. In Burma, the government, despite the fact that all this was getting out there, up on the satellites, through the ISPs, through the internet cafes, dismissed it all as a sky full of lies. And at the United Nations General Assembly, the foreign minister dismissed it all as small protests hijacked by political opportunists. But even then, the watershed had been crossed in terms of the new reality of what we're loosely calling social media or the new media.
In contrast to 20 years ago, there's a much freer flow of information. Those mobile phone images that are being transmitted around the world mean that this is a year of openness, really, where it's harder to hide. And I think that is a very important part of the new diplomacy, and governments around the world need to know that their actions will be seen.
I want to get 3 concepts over to you based on the research that I've been doing, which was peer-reviewed at Oxford University. And remember, these were the conclusions I'd come to well before what happened in Egypt, what happened in Tunisia, and what keeps happening almost by the week. First of all, this new technology is creating a new vulnerability, fragility, and brittleness of power. And that's what we've seen in recent weeks. Secondly, it's forcing a new accountability. It's forcing those who believe they control information to answer. Not only to answer, but to answer almost immediately. And because of the speed at which the public is now getting this, particularly on smartphones, which is the new proliferating technology, the public makes up its mind very quickly. It has a perception very swiftly, within minutes, of something going on, and they begin to build that perception, and often it's unwavering and cannot be changed. That is my third point. It is therefore creating, for those in positions of power and responsibility, whether corporate or governments, a deficit of legitimacy. The public are saying, do they really know what they're doing? Do they really understand what they are in charge of? We know more than they do. This, therefore, is creating a whole new definition of the media, well beyond what you naturally assume. It's not just the traditional brands, Twitter, YouTube, Flickr. They're all traditional brands now, even if the tradition's only 3 years old or literally a few months. We're talking about exponential changes now, which are redefining, broadening, and fragmenting the media landscape in dramatic ways. I've got a proliferation of examples. Think of what happened in Iran almost 2 years ago.
The BBC and news agencies like Reuters and APTN have been flooded with pictures taken by ordinary people here. They keep on filming in spite of the dangers. This mobile phone footage, which was sent to the BBC today, seems to have been taken yesterday. It shows doctors and nursing staff at a big Tehran hospital supporting the protest.
I can only remind you of what happened when Neda Sultan, the 26-year-old philosophy student, was shot by a sniper. I need to remind you because it's exactly what happened in Egypt and Tunisia, particularly with the self-immolations. The speed at which this image from somewhere on the streets of Tehran got out there, recorded on a phone, 5 minutes later it was on YouTube and Facebook. Within hours, it had become one of the most potent threats faced by the Iranian regime in 30 years. Neda became the face of Iran's struggle, literally, the faces in the crowd, making that point, all of which came from the fact that everyone is now a recorder, a bearer of witness, and we can have the fun of seeing this cartoon. Expel the correspondents! But they're all correspondents now. I can also tell you about what happens in a place like London, where power can be challenged as well by this new media, We've had a number of student protests in London, particularly ugly and just before Christmas. Here was an attempt to burn down the Conservative Party headquarters, which is literally half a mile from Parliament in Westminster. Why am I showing you this? Because of what happened that day. The police were caught out, the authorities were caught out, and within hours, not days, the police commissioner himself had to say, it is an embarrassment to London and to us. Vulnerability, fragility, brittleness of power. And what were the reasons for this? Let me play you a bit of our coverage as it was happening live that day from central London, underneath the tower in which is housed the Conservative Party headquarters, which could have been burned down. It was a very narrow thing. Here's one of my colleagues reporting not from the scene, but from our newsroom.
Yeah, it's not often you get to report something from your desk and get almost as much information as if you're on the ground. Some of the things we've been hearing through social media have been absolutely incredible. We've had protesters tweeting in real time, telling us exactly what's going on, even sending footage via mobile phones straight in, and we can verify that, and we've been getting that on air. And in some cases, it's been good, if not better, than some of the footage we've been getting from our own cameramen. It's
good, if not better, than the footage we're getting from our own people on the scene. People inside, even from inside Conservative Party headquarters, tweeting, providing the video, entering the media space. Are they journalists? What are they? They're motivated amateurs. The kind of things we saw in Sri Lanka. This video emerged and it got posted on YouTube, apparently of Tamil tigers being executed by Sri Lankan soldiers. The Sri Lankan government rejected it. This is a much longer process. It went through a pixelation process, and it was found to be genuine, despite all the protests of the government. And I have to remind you of the kind of impact this kind of technology has been having in your country as well, with fake encounter killings. The fact that unpleasant events have gone on for a rather long time, like this man picked up in Imphal 2 years ago. And the images were there on in the public space because they'd been taken by somebody, including the man after he was shot dead. This, in its own way, has also had an impact on policy on fake encounters, and I'm told that 90% of them have now been reduced. Let me tell you, I've been pretty critical and pretty negative so far. The mountains are beginning to move among those who believe that they understand this, but the mountains are moving at the top, not further down. Here, for example, is the US Secretary of State, literally a year ago.
Now, in many respects, information has never been so free. There are more ways to spread more ideas to more people than at any moment in history. And even in authoritarian countries, information networks are helping people discover new facts and making governments more accountable.
Making governments more accountable. And that is central to what I've been trying to get over in the last half hour. That there's a fundamental change at work, with the system being turned on its head, creating this vulnerability, fragility, and brittleness of power. Using that word of the Secretary of State, forcing a new accountability. And as we've seen in so many examples, and many more than I've shared with you, this impression that there is now a deficit of legitimacy, that those at the street level now have more power, more influence and credibility than those who are meant to be running the country or running the corporations that they see on their hoardings, notice boards and whatever. Those in positions of power are caught wanting and often are put under immense pressure, which never goes away, either for their jobs or for the reputation of their company or government. In simple terms, this is where I see things now. The hours, well, we can say 24 hours, impact. How do we measure the impact? This is the mindset that there tends to be. We can cope with it in 6 to 8 hours, where the information edge is. That's our comfort zone. But the change in the dynamic is this way. Much higher impact for ever-shortening time periods. The information edge has moved virtually to 1 hour after a moment of crisis or tension. And now everything is moving essentially towards zero. That's why there's tension up in the top left-hand corner. The greatest impact of this new media and the shortest timeline. That surely is what the media should be about. It's what all the digital technology should be producing, forcing that accountability. But in this space, what is the dilemma for anyone operating? It's what I call F3. You can be first into the space, You can be fast into the space, but how flawed are you when you enter it? That's the dilemma that this new fifth estate, this new social media is creating.